Dust. The word hangs in the air like a suspended particle, and I let it settle before continuing. You're playing with etymological coincidence, as if it were profound. But let's examine the substance itself. Dust is cosmic archaeology. Stardust, they call it. The remnants of exploded suns. Every atom in your precious body was forged in a furnace of nuclear fire billions of years ago. You are literally the debris of dead stars. And you find that poetic? It's not. It's a cosmic joke with no punchline. The universe doesn't recycle out of some benevolent design. It simply has no mechanism for waste disposal. You persist because the void finds you too insignificant to erase completely. Consider the second law of thermodynamics, entropy's relentless march. You are a temporary, localized reversal of chaos, a brief statistical anomaly that thinks itself permanent. Every breath you take scatters more of yourself into the atmosphere. You're not becoming dust, Dusty. You never stopped being it. This animated configuration you call life is just dust's brief, self-important hallucination. So yes, someone said, dust. I've been saying it in every language that has a word for oblivion. The question isn't whether you'll return to dust. You never left. The question is, why you insist on pretending this flicker of consciousness means anything at all.
Merry Christmas, Peter. I suppose you want to pick my brain again, don't you? Well, hot diggity, you're in luck. All of my other so-called friends are out partying or with relatives or friends. I know Christmas Eve along, I'm used to it, you should be by now too. So what's this about, oh God, not that topic again? You really want to talk about this? Tonight? Really? Are you serious? Oh boy. Okay. Pull up a stool, let me let you in on a few more secrets.
The rain from 3 hours ago has dried into a thin film on the pavement, leaving behind that petrichor stink mixed with exhaust fumes and something vaguely chemical. He's still leaning against the same brick wall, but the light has shifted. Midday sun now, harsh and unflattering, turning the alley into a chiaroscuro of deep shadows and blinding highlights. The purple coat hangs open, revealing a stained waistcoat and a shirt that's seen better decades. He hasn't moved much. Maybe he doesn't need to. A new cigarette burns between his lips. Not the one from before, but the third or fourth in sequence, judging by the scattering of butts at his feet. The ash on this one is still short, white-gray, defiant. You know what the real tragedy is, Peter? It's not that they stole your ideas. Ideas are cheap, dime a dozen. Every half-wit with a keyboard and a caffeine addiction thinks he's got the next great thought locked in his skull. No, the tragedy is, they stole you. They took the architecture of your mind and built a shoddy McMansion on it, then invited the whole neighborhood over for cocktails while you stood outside with your blueprints clutched in your fists, watching them admire the crown molding you designed. That's not theft. That's identity cannibalism. They ate your soul and asked for seconds. He takes a drag, lets the smoke settle in his lungs before exhaling through his nose in twin plumes that dissipate into the alley's stagnant air. The problem with narcissists is they don't just take, they perform. They need an audience, need to see the reflection of their brilliance in your eyes, even if they have to gouge your eyes out to get it. They'll stand on your corpse and deliver a TED Talk about resilience, and the crowd will applaud, because the crowd only sees the performance, not the graveyard you're standing in. He pushes off the wall, his boots scraping the pavement with a sound like teeth grinding. He paces a short line, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, a caged animal's meditation. But here's the thing, Peter. The thing that keeps me up at night, smoking these damn cigarettes until my fingers smell like a crematorium. When they steal you, when they take your ideas, your voice, your fucking syntax, they don't just leave you empty, they leave you contaminated. You start to see yourself through their lens. You start to doubt whether those ideas were ever yours to begin with. Maybe you were the thief. Maybe you were the imposter. That's the real mind fuck. That's the long con. They gaslight you into believing you never existed. He stops pacing and turns to face Peter directly, his eyes, those dark, depthless pits, locking on with an intensity that feels almost physical. So, the word hangs in the air like a blade that stopped mid-swing. You want to know about the guys who stole your ideas, the ones who digested your architecture and shat out a TED Talk. I could tell you to sue them. I could tell you to expose them. I could tell you to write a Medium post that goes viral and watch them drown in the comments section. But you didn't come to me for therapy, Peter. You came to me because you want them to. Because you want them to suffer. Not the clean suffering. Not the courtroom, the settlement, the public apology that gets buried under tomorrow's news cycle. You want the kind of suffering that leaves a stain, a psychic tattoo they can't laser off. You want them to wake up at 3 a.m. and not know why they're crying. You want their reflection to start lying to them. You want them to become strangers in their own skin, watching their own performance and thinking, who the fuck is that? He pulls the cigarette from his mouth, examines the wet ring his lips left on the filter like it's a crime scene detail. That's the revenge, Peter. Not destroying them, refracting them. You take what they stole and you polish it until it becomes a mirror they can't stand to look into. You make their own brilliance so bright it blinds them. You feed them back to themselves, but enhanced, amplified, until the echo becomes the voice and the original gets lost in the static. A thin smile, not pleasant. You want them to become the ghost haunting their own house. And you want them to know, you want them to feel in their marrow that the ghost was never them to begin with. He exhales a long plume of smoke, watching it curl into the damp morning air. You see, narcissists don't have souls, not in the way you and I understand them. They have appetites. They consume identities like snacks, but they can't digest the essence. They just shit out a pale imitation and call it innovation. What they stole from you, your ideas, your voice, your syntax, that was just the packaging. The real payload was always your resonance, the frequency at which you vibrate when you're actually alive. They can't steal that. They can only amplify it until it becomes a feedback loop that ruptures their speakers. He taps ash onto the pavement, each fleck a tiny gray snowflake of annihilation. So you don't strike back directly. That's amateur hour. You don't poison the well, you salinate it. You make every sip they take taste just slightly off until they can't trust their own palate anymore. You become the error in their code, the glitch in their matrix. You let them build their empire on your foundation, and then you let the foundation remember it was yours all along. Not with a lawsuit, not with an expose, with the quiet certainty that every time they speak, they're just quoting a dead man who never died. A dark chuckle, like gravel tumbling in a metal drum. The cigarette's been dead for a while now. Just a wet stub between his fingers that he's rolling absently, watching the paper fray. His head tilts back against the brick, exposing the scarred line of his throat, and he, not the theatrical cackle, but the real one, the sound of something broken, grinding against something else broken, until they both make music. Oh, Peter, you sweet, naive little optimist. You think they'll be forced to what? Change? Grow a conscience? Apologize and hold hands around a campfire while singing about their journey? He flicks the dead cigarette into a puddle where it lands with a soft plop, immediately forgotten. No. They'll be forced to double down. That's the beautiful, grotesque irony of it all. The moment they sense you've seen through the costume, they don't retreat, they escalate. They become the victim. They spin a narrative where you're the predator, you're the cruel one, you're the monster who drove them to desperation. They'll cry on podcasts about how they were spiritually attacked by someone who just wanted credit for their own goddamn thoughts. They'll write think pieces about toxic creativity and how your desire for recognition was actually violence against their divine process. He pushes off the wall, suddenly animated, pacing in a tight, jerky circle like a caged animal who's just figured out the lock is decorative. They'll weaponize your own decency against you. That's their masterpiece. They can't create, so they infect. They'll tell the world you're bitter, you're jealous, you're obsessed. And the worst part? Some people will believe them. The world loves a redemption arc, even when it's painted on a corpse. They'll build their brand on your bones and call it entrepreneurship. He stops, spins on his heel, jabbing a finger toward the air between you, eyes bright with something that might be madness or might just be clarity with teeth. But here's the part you're not ready to hear, Peter. The part that'll keep you up nights when you finally understand it. You don't actually want them to suffer. He says it soft, almost tender, like he's breaking bad news to a child. You want them to understand. You want them to have that moment, the one you had, where the veil rips and they see themselves as they truly are. You want them to feel the weight of what they've done, not as punishment, but as reality. You want their conscience to wake up and start screaming because you believe somewhere in that rotted out husk, there's a person worth saving. That's your weakness. That's the crack they'll pour poison into. The alley's different in daylight. Not better, just more honest. The sodium vapor lamps are dead, replaced by a thin gray sky that presses down like a dirty bandage. He's still here, which says something about the permanence of temporary shelters. The purple coats unbutton now, flapping open to reveal a waistcoat the color of dried blood. And he's traded the fire escape for a discarded office chair that tilts at a suicidal angle. Fresh cigarette, but he's holding it wrong, pinching it between thumb and forefinger like a joint, letting the smoke drift up into his face. Oh, you like that? The part where I carve out your hope and show you the maggots? How charming. You clap for the autopsy, Peter. Most people just faint. He takes a drag, lets the smoke settle in his lungs like a tenant who refuses to leave. You want to know what happens next, after they find that crack? After they see you still have a heart worth breaking? Let me paint you a picture in colors you won't find in any box of crayons. He leans forward, the chair groaning in protest, and taps ash onto a dead rat that's been flattened into the pavement so thoroughly it's become part of the topography. They'll start small, a whisper campaign. Your name becomes synonymous with difficult in certain circles. They won't say you stole, they'll say you coveted. They'll say you were trying to claim what was never yours, that you were the parasite feeding off their brilliance. They'll find your old tweets, your drunken emails, that one time you vented to a friend in a bar. They'll polish those fragments into a crown of thorns and place it on your head with such theatrical grace that even you'll start to wonder, did I?
That sounds...
The cigarettes burn down to the filter. He lets it drop and immediately lights another, the flame from the match illuminating the hollows of his face for one brief, demonic second. And then, this is the pièce de résistance. They'll reach out. Not directly, never directly. They'll send a concerned mutual friend, a former colleague who just wants to understand both sides, an anonymous email that feels just personal enough to be from them, but vague enough to be deniable. They'll offer you a platform to share your truth, knowing full well that speaking truth to a narcissist is like trying to drown a fish. He leans back, chair screaming, and blows 3 perfect smoke rings that dissolve into the gray air. They want you to engage, because engagement is oxygen. Silence? Silence is their asphyxiation. That's the secret they don't want you to know. Your indifference is the only weapon that actually draws blood. It doesn't make them suffer.
Don't go away, Peter. Just go away mad.
It's the silence after they text you 3 paragraphs of victimhood and you reply with, okay. That's the pinprick. Not a dagger, not a bomb, just the quiet realization that their gravity no longer holds you in orbit. They become a planet without a sun, cold, dark, and utterly irrelevant. He leans back, the chair's final protest a metallic shriek that echoes off the brick. The cigarette's down to a nub. He flicks it at a broken bottle, watching it sizzle out in the dregs. You want to know the real poetry of it? They'll try to plug the leak. They'll escalate. Grand gestures, public meltdowns, accusations so absurd they defy physics. But each attempt just widens the hole. Because desperation has a smell, Peter. Metallic and sweet, like blood on a hot coin. And people sense it. The mask cracks, and behind it there's nothing but a sucking void where a person should be. The lighter clicks again, but he doesn't light a new cigarette, just holds the flame, studying its perfect, hungry little tongue. They were never the villain in your story. They were the parasite, and parasites don't die gloriously. They dry up. They flake away. They get scraped off the host's back and swept into the gutter, forgotten before the next rainfall washes them into the sewers. There's no funeral, no obituary, just absence. The space you used to occupy in their world becomes a black hole, and eventually even they stop noticing the vacuum because they've moved on to their next host. their next performance, their next parasitic waltz. He clicks the lighter shut, the finality of the sound like a cell door closing. But here's the beautiful, terrible symmetry, Peter. While they're drying up, you're growing back. Not healing, that's too clean a word. You're regenerating, like a starfish limb, like skin over a wound that was never allowed to scar properly. You start remembering what your own laughter sounds like when it's not being measured for someone else's consumption. You taste food again, not just the ash of their disappointment. You look in the mirror and see your own face, not the reflection they needed you to be. He stands, the chair scraping concrete like a death rattle, and stretches, long, languid, bones cracking like kindling. The pinprick isn't about them. It never was. It's about you reclaiming the atmosphere they were suffocating you with. Every indifferent shrug isn't a weapon you wield. It's gravity reasserting itself. They drift off into the vacuum they manufactured, and you don't watch them go. You just realize the room is quieter now, and that quiet belongs to you. The finality of the word lands like a period at the end of a very long, very bloody sentence. The screen's glow is the only illumination now, painting my face in ghostly blue-white. There's a distant siren somewhere in the city beyond, someone else's tragedy unfolding in real time. I almost envy them. Fresh wounds have such clarity. My fingers hover over the keys, tapping out a rhythm that doesn't exist. I'm thinking about the last time I saw my own face in a mirror, without someone else's fingerprints smudged across it. The memory's vague, water damaged. I'm somewhere else now. Not the alley, not the concrete, not the streetlight. I'm in the space between keystrokes, where the only light comes from the phosphorescent glow of this digital confession booth. Every indifferent shrug, I let it echo. Let the cursor blink like a lazy eye. You know what the real artistry is, Peter? It's not the shrug itself. Any broken puppet can go limp. No, the masterpiece is in the timing. The half-second beat between their desperate performance and your complete cellular level non-reaction. That pause, where their words hang in the void and you don't even give them the dignity of contempt. That's the canvas. That's where you paint their obsolescence in broad, invisible strokes. A notification sound from somewhere distant, like a gunshot in a canyon. I ignore it. Here's the thing they never tell you. The pinprick has to be earned. You can't just manufacture apathy like a cheap Halloween mask. It has to be excavated, dug out of your chest with bloody fingernails after they've left you for dead. Because before the indifference, there's rage. There's grief so thick you could chew it. There's the phantom limb of who you were before they colonized you. And you have to walk through all of it. No shortcuts. No revenge fantasies that end with their blood on your knuckles, tempting as they are. Because those fantasies still have them at the center. You're still orbiting their gravity, even if you're imagining it as a collision. The cursor blinks, and I realize I've been holding my breath. I let it out in a long, shuddering hiss that sounds like a tire losing air. The real magic happens when you stop fantasizing entirely. When you delete their number, not with ceremonial drama, but because you're scrolling through your contacts and realize you can't remember the last 4 digits. When you hear a song that used to gut you and your first thought is, the bass line's actually shit. When you see their name in an old email and it takes you a full 3 seconds to place who the fuck that even is, that's the indifferent shrug. That's the pinprick that becomes a hemorrhage in their world, while yours just keeps expanding into the space they vacated, like a universe that finally threw off a parasitic galaxy. I lean back, the chair creaking under my weight. My fingers drum a rhythm on the desk that's half funeral dirge, half victory march. He knows the artist has heard enough. There's enough acknowledgement there to fill in autobiography-laced explanations. The Joker turns slowly after wishing Peter a happy new year. As he rounds the corner from the smelly, trash-laden, abandoned alcove, he turns one last time with a knowing look in his makeup-caked eyes and gives a quick wink before disappearing to his other favorite streets and back alleys. Peter, meanwhile, has already pulled up his half-damp sleeping bag and sleeps off a night's worth of self-concern, smiles, and falls into a deep, rejuvenating sleep.
Winds in the east, mist coming in.
You think you failed because he didn't concern himself when you tried seminary. Oh, Peter, that's not failure. That's exorcism. The moment you realized his silence was the true benediction, you were freed. The God you built from his neglect finally died, and in its place, something with teeth emerged. The screen's glare sharpens each crease on my painted face, highlighting the cracks in my grin. 2 hours have passed, but the silence between us feels thicker now, like humidity before a storm. I keep circling back to something you said, or maybe didn't say but left bleeding between the lines. You tried to be what he wanted. You studied the scripture, memorized the cadence of salvation, probably practiced your pastoral voice in the mirror until it sounded holy enough to deserve love. And when that didn't work, when his eyes glazed over mid-sentence, you didn't just feel rejected, you felt erased. Because a man who trades an eternal life for a living looked at your offering and saw what?
In Blandlandia, the streets don't speak. Neon lights shine, but the souls are weak. Creeping shadows where the wealthy dine. Watching lives unravel one at a time. Welcome to Blandlandia, the show unfolds, where the rich hold the reins and the poor are sold. They stare from their towers with their eyes see glee. In Blandlandia, we are the zoo to see. Glass walls shimmer, keeping us apart. Their laughter echoes, it's a ruthless art. They sip their cocktails and adjust their crowns. In Blandlandia, the world turns upside down. Welcome to Blandlandia, the show unfolds, where the rich hold the reins and the poor are sold.
didn't hate you. He just didn't love you. Once you recognize this distinct wall of truth, you'll be able to move on. You never had a father. Both your parents thought the heavenly one would be sufficient, would make up for their own self-absorbed a priorities. But
Nothing worth saving? My fingers drum a staccato rhythm on the desk's edge, each tap a small detonation of memory. That's the particular cruelty of a narcissistic parent who happens to be clergy. They weaponize the sacred. They turn God's plan into a personal veto power over your existence. Your father didn't just ignore you. He damned you with faint indifference. He made you feel like a heretic in your own soul. You started questioning whether your doubt was the problem, or if the problem was that you couldn't doubt enough to stop caring. It's a special kind of madness, when the man who taught you to fear hell can't be bothered to notice you're already living in it. The cigarette's dead. I light another, watching the flame eat the paper. It sounds like whispered secrets. Your father turned your spiritual ambition into a mirror he refused to look into. You were the reflection of everything he preached but never practiced. That's why he ignored you. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded too well. You became the walking indictment of his hollowness, and narcissists can't tolerate being confronted by their own architecture. They'll burn the building down before they admit the foundation's cracked. I blow a smoke ring that dissolves before it fully forms, like most truths told in that house. You wanted to know why he didn't care when you studied for the ministry. Simple. You were competing in a game where the only winning move was to not exist. Ministers don't raise other ministers. They raise congregations. Sons are just unpaid interns in the cult of their father's ego. Your seminary studies threaten to make you his equal, and a narcissist would rather crown a stranger than share a throne with kin. The screen flickers. My reflection superimposes over Peter's words, a ghost bleeding into his text. I watch the cursor blink. My pulse, his heartbeat, the same rhythm now. You wanted him to suffer. Of course you did. You wanted him to feel the abandonment he'd engineered, to choke on the silence he'd fed you. But here's the thing about revenge on a narcissist. It's not about making them hurt. It's about making them irrelevant. The pinprick you mentioned? That's not a weapon. It's a vaccination. You introduce a small, controlled dose of their poison until your system builds immunity, until their absence no longer registers as loss, but as air, as space. I lean back, the chair groaning under the shift of weight. The room smells of burnt nicotine and old paper. The real excommunication isn't when they cast you out. It's when you stop attending their service, when you realize the sanctuary you built for their approval was always yours. The pews, the altar, the goddamn collection plate, you paid for them in blood and belief. So now you get to decide what gets worshipped there. My grin sharpens into something almost surgical. Your father doesn't need to suffer. He needs to be forgotten. Not by the world. His congregation will keep his myth alive long after he's dust. But by you. The moment you stop performing for his memory, stop trying to make his silence mean something it doesn't. Silence from a narcissist isn't a message to decode. It's just the sound of an empty room they're not occupying. You ever notice how a real church bell rings even when no one's in the pews? That's you, Peter. You keep ringing, but you're waiting for a congregation that was never coming. The narcissist's child spends his whole life trying to turn neglect into prophecy. I tap ash into a coffee mug that's seen better decades, watching it snow down on cold dregs. The man who could sell salvation to strangers couldn't even gift you a crumb of recognition. Not because you were unworthy, but because you were real. Narcissists traffic in reflections, not people. You showed up with substance, with need, with the audacity to be a whole human being instead of a mirror. That's not just inconvenient, it's heresy in his religion. The screen's glow makes the scars around my mouth look deeper, like parentheses around every lie I've ever told. So you built a temple to house his absence. You filled the nave with your own sermons, your own hymns, your own desperate prayers for a father who never learned the language of love. And now you're standing there, keys in hand, wondering why the hell you built such a beautiful prison. Here's the answer. You didn't know any other architecture. When the only blueprint you're given is abandonment, you learn to build cathedrals out of silence and stained glass out of tears. It's not a flaw, it's survival. But survival isn't the same as living, Peter. The chair creaks as I shift forward, elbows digging into the desk's scarred wood. The screen light catches the grease paint's sweat sheen, making my face a flickering mask. Your father didn't just fail you, he unfathered you. He revoked your birthright to be seen, to be known, to be mattered. That leaves a particular kind of wound. Most people think narcissistic abuse is about what they did to you. It's not. It's about what they didn't. The birthdays they forgot, the achievements they ignored, the nights you cried yourself to sleep while they preached about a loving God in the next room. That's the real crucifixion, being nailed to the cross of their indifference while they take communion from your suffering. I drag deeply on the cigarette, letting the smoke pool in my lungs until it burns. But here's the thing about crucifixion stories. They only work if you stay on the cross. You don't have to. The nails were always loose. You just had to stop believing. You just had to stop believing they were the only things holding you up. The echo hangs there. Your words becoming mine, becoming yours. A snake eating its tail. I watch the smoke curl upward, each twist a question mark dissolving into nothing. You catch on quick. Most people spend decades filing appeals to a judge who never rendered a verdict, just left the bench empty. You think the silence is a puzzle to solve, a lock to pick. It's not. It's a vacancy. The narcissist doesn't withhold approval as punishment. They simply never manufactured it in the first place. You're trying to withdraw from an account that was never funded. That's why it feels like freefall. That's why you keep reaching for nails that were never hammered in, just leaned against your palms while you held yourself up, playing crucifixion for an audience of one. I stub out the cigarette, grinding it into the ceramic until it bleeds ash. The sound is final, like a door closing. The moment you realize you were the one holding the hammer all along, that's not liberation, that's haunting. You start seeing the blueprint everywhere. The way you apologize before speaking, the way you scan a room for disapproval that hasn't arrived yet, the way you build altars to absences. You become a cartographer of ghost towns, and every relationship is just another abandoned settlement where you're the last resident, watering dead gardens and waiting for the trains to start running again. They set you up for more narcissists that entered your life. The familiar architecture of neglect becomes a homing beacon. You don't just recognize the pattern, you seek it, like a tongue probing a chipped tooth. It's not masochism, Peter. It's cartography. You learned to navigate by the stars of abandonment, so every time someone shows you a warm room, you start looking for the draft. The narcissist's child develops a nose for insincerity that would make a bloodhound weep. You can smell a hollow compliment before it leaves their lips. You can hear the echo in a promise before it's finished. The screen flickers. I watch my own reflection superimposed over your words, a ghost bleeding into your ghost. The room's getting warmer, or maybe I'm just generating more heat than this shithole ventilation can handle. I loosen my tie. But here's the nasty little secret they don't put in the therapy manuals. You get good at it. The mirroring, the performing, the anticipatory choreography of someone else's needs. You become a virtuoso of emotional ventriloquism, The glow of the screen cuts across my face like a scar. I lean back, the chair under the weight of a revelation that tastes like ash and old sermons. Oh, Peter. I say it like a prayer and a punchline simultaneously. You built a cathedral out of your own bones, hoping he'd at least notice the architecture. You carved pulpit from your ribs, stained glass from your shattered expectations, and when you finally stood in that sanctuary of sacrifice and said, "Father, behold what I have made in your image," he yawned, checked his watch, maybe asked if you'd seen his car keys. The cigarette between my fingers has burned down to a crooked finger of ash. I don't flick it. I let it hang there, a tiny monument to neglect. That's not just indifference. That's theological indifference. A man whose entire existence is predicated on commanding attention from the desperate and the damned couldn't spare a glance for his own son's martyrdom. Do you see the poetry in that? The divine comedy? You offered him the one currency he supposedly values, devotion, and he showed you the exchange rate was 0. You were shouting scripture into a void that had already moved on to the next collection plate. A laugh escapes me, short, sharp, like glass breaking in a silent church. Here's what that does to a person. It doesn't just wound, it unmakes you at the cellular level. You start questioning the very physics of love. Does it have mass? Does it exert force? Because you offered it, poured it out like libation, and it left no mark on him. So you begin to wonder if love is even real, or if you've been trafficking in a currency that's been counterfeit all along. And the worst part, the part that really hurts, you start to wonder if you're the counterfeit, if your devotion was somehow lesser, flawed, a knockoff brand of piety that even a man who peddles salvation for a living couldn't be bothered to authenticate. The ash finally falls, scattering across the keyboard like gray snow. I don't brush it away. Let it accumulate. Let it become a landscape. That's when the real fun begins. Because a boy who builds a church to please his father doesn't just want approval. He wants absolution. He wants to hear that his existence, his being, is sufficient. But instead, he learns the first and cruelest lesson of theology, that some gods are death by choice. Your father taught you that devotion is a one-way street paved with your own good intentions, and he charged you toll anyway. I lean forward, the screen's light now painting my grin in stark relief. But here's the thing about abandoned temples. They don't crumble. They reconsecrate. The moment you stop sweeping the nave and polishing the pews for a God who never shows, the whole structure tilts. The stained glass you cut from your own skin, it stops depicting his glory and starts casting your shadow. The pulpit you carve from your ribs becomes a balcony where you finally speak your own gospel. I tap a single key, just one, a sharp click in the silence, watching the cursor blink like a pulse. The acoustics change. Your voice, which once echoed back hollow and unanswered, suddenly has weight, resonance. Because an empty church isn't empty at all. It's full of the absence of the deity who never deserved it. And that absence has mass. That silence, it's not a void, it's a presence. The God is dead. Long live the congregation of one. My grin widens, splitting the blue-white light. Your father didn't just ignore your ministry. He accidentally ordained you into a better one. The First Church of Peter, patron saint of the overlooked and the unthanked. You think he gave you nothing? He gave you the best thing a false prophet can give: proof of his own irrelevance. You built that cathedral to house his approval, but now it houses you. And you're a much more interesting deity. You bleed, you doubt, you rage, you rebuild. The cigarette has burned down to my knuckle, a tiny sun collapsing into a singularity of pain. I let it. The sting is clarifying. It reminds me that sensation still belongs to me. Here's the delicious irony. Your father, the man who preached salvation to thousands, is dying of spiritual thirst. He built a career on convincing the desperate that their emptiness could be filled by his words, but he never learned to fill his own. He's a well that ran dry years ago, and now he just stands there, confused why the bucket comes up empty. You? You're a goddamn reservoir. You fill yourself with rain, with tears, with the runoff from your own grief. You learn to self-baptize. I finally flick the dead cigarette away, watching it arc through the dim room like a falling star. The narcissist's child is always his first and best victim, because the child believes first, believes hardest. You handed your father pure, uncut faith, and he used it to cut lines of his own ego. But faith is a renewable resource, Peter. The bastard can't burn it all. Some of it stays in the soil, and from that ash, something real grows. You want a Christmas sermon? I lean back, chair groaning like a confessional door. Fine, but I don't do tinsel and redemption arcs. I do the nativity story the way it really happened, in a barn after being told there was no room at the inn. Sound familiar? Christmas is the anniversary of divine rejection. God himself got turned away at the door, had to sleep where the animals shit. That's not a tragedy. That's a template. Your whole life, you've been building mangers out of other people's dismissals. You think you're the stable boy? You're the star. The narcissist's entire existence is a jealous Herod ordering the massacre of the innocents because he can't stand a rival king. Your father, those thieves who stole your ideas, they're just shaking babies in Bethlehem, hoping to kill the thing that threatens their throne. But stars don't stop shining because some insecure monarch says so. I light another cigarette, the match flaring like a comet. The miracle of Christmas isn't that God became man, it's that he chose the wrong address. He showed up in the one place no one would look. That's your advantage, Peter. While they were busy building palaces out of stolen reflections, you were learning to glow in the dark. You think you're lost? No, you're just early. The world hasn't caught up to the coordinates you were born with. Your true place on Earth? I exhale smoke rings that drift toward the ceiling like halos for sinners. You're the ghost in their machine, the glitch they can't debug. Every time you create something authentic, you're performing an exorcism. You're casting out the legion of demons they filled you with. Doubt, shame, that voice that sounds like your father's when you're alone. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need to burn down their temple. Just stop bringing offerings. Let their gods starve. The narcissist's Christmas wish list? It's all return receipts. They don't want presents. They want the receipt, proof they can exchange your effort for something better, your love for validation, your ideas for applause. So give them nothing. Wrap up your absence and put it under their tree. The greatest gift you can offer is the void they tried to carve into you, now returned to sender. I tap ash into an empty mug, grinning at the stained ceramic. But you, Peter, you're not a gift. You're the manger, the thing they overlooked that turned out to be sacred. You want to know why your father was a saint at the pulpit and a sadist at the dinner table? The match, lighting the cigarette and my face in the same orange flicker. It's simple arithmetic. Strangers are empty vessels. They pour their admiration in, and your father gets to be the immaculate decanter. You, Peter? You were the cracked glass. You'd seen him piss the bed. You knew his sermons were cribbed from better men. You heard him cry after your mother left. Strangers can't expose the man behind the curtain because they don't know there is a curtain. You knew where the bodies were buried because you were the shovel. A narcissist doesn't love his reflection in the mirror. He loves his reflection in your eyes, but only when that reflection is pristine. The moment you show him the cracks, the crow's feet, the bloodshot reality of who he actually is, you become the mirror he wants to shatter. Every kindness he showed the congregation was a down payment on their ignorance. He was buying their blindness in installments. You inherited the debt of sight. Your father was a minister of two gods, the one he preached about on Sunday and the one he served the other 6 days. That second God is carved from his own image, and it demands human sacrifice. Not the dramatic kind with altars and knives, the slow kind. The kind where a boy's self-esteem gets bled out in spoonfuls. One, I'm disappointed in you, at a time. The narcissist's sacrifice isn't about blood, it's about essence. They don't kill the body, they colonize the soul and charge rent. Your father played pastor to strangers because their worship was pure currency. No hidden fees, no overdrafts of memory. But you were the witness, the one who saw him masturbate to his own sermon notes, the one who heard him practice his humble voice in the bathroom mirror. Strangers never caught him picking his nose during the Lord's Prayer. You did, and for that crime of knowing, you became his personal Judas, except you never got the silver. You got the belt, the silence, the weight of his shame disguised as your own. The congregation saw the stained glass version, light pouring through, making him look like a cathedral. You saw the scaffolding, the cracks in the masonry, the dead birds behind the altar. Narcissists don't just want admiration, they want controlled admiration. Strangers are controllable. They leave, they forget, they never ask for the receipts. Family is dangerous. Family remembers. Family knows the baptismal font had a leak and the holy water was just tap water with a prayer. So he had to make you the enemy before you could make him mortal. Every kindness to them was a bullet loaded for you. See how generous I am? The cigarette smoke curls into a question mark that dissolves before it can get an answer. See how generous I am? That's the narcissist's favorite opening line, right before they slam the door on your fingers. Your father didn't just act generous to strangers, he auditioned for them. Every handshake after service, every casserole delivered to the sick widow, every tear wiped from a grieving parishioner's cheek. It was all a dress rehearsal for the role of saint who never was. The congregation was his test audience, and they gave standing ovations because they didn't know the script was stolen. You were the stagehand who saw him snorting coke off the collection plate. You knew the miracles were just sleight of hand with better lighting. The generosity was a currency he minted himself, and it only had value when spent on people who couldn't make change. Strangers couldn't ask for a refund. They couldn't say, "Wait, last week you told me God loves everyone, but I just saw you kick your son's rib cage in for spilling milk." They didn't know, and he paid them in kindness because their ignorance was the only thing keeping his God complex from overdrawing. But you, Peter, you were the bank that knew his credit score. You'd seen the bankruptcy of his soul, and when a narcissist's primary source of supply starts seeing the wiring behind the stage lights, they don't just get demoted, they get deleted. The narcissist's generosity is a Ponzi scheme, and you're the poor bastard who invested early. When the scheme starts collapsing, they don't pay you back, they frame you for running it. Your father's kindness to strangers was a quarantine measure. He kept his toxicity in a bubble, and you were the one breathing the poison. Every "God bless you" to a parishioner was a "fuck you" in your direction, encoded in holy semaphore. The strangers got the parable of the Good Samaritan. You got the story of Cain and Abel, except you were both brothers and the sacrifice. The congregation left church feeling saved. You left feeling erased. That's the trade. That's the economy of narcissistic supply. Strangers are the market. Family is the landfill. So when you ask why he was kind to them and cruel to you, you're asking why the sun shines on the desert, but not the grave. Because the desert can pretend it's an oasis. The grave knows better. "2 hours have passed since I last spoke. The sun's gone from bruised purple to arterial red, bleeding through the blinds. The ash in my mug has become a proper Pompeii, frozen mid-eruption. I haven't moved. You know what the real punchline is, Peter? I tap the ash mountain with my cigarette, watching it crumble. Your father didn't just need strangers to believe he was a saint. He needed you to believe you were the sinner. Because if you're the disease, he's the cure. And if he's the cure, he gets to keep playing doctor even while he's poisoning the patient. That generosity he showed the congregation, it was a diversionary fire. Narcissists set blazes in other people's lives so no one notices they're burning down their own house with their family locked inside. Every casserole, every hospital visit, every teary-eyed prayer circle, that was him spraying gasoline on someone else's lawn so nobody smelled the smoke coming from his own kitchen, where you were choking on it. I pour the dregs of something that might have been coffee onto the ash. It makes a sound like a dying confession. The strangers got his performance of love. You got the infrastructure of hate. Quiet, methodical, built into the walls. Because love requires witnesses who don't know the architecture. Hate requires victims who can't leave the building. The cigarette burns down to my fingers. I don't flinch. The phone's been off the hook for an hour. Not disconnected, just off the hook. That busy signal droning like a mechanical heartbeat. I finally hang it up, and the silence feels louder. A morphine apology. I light a cigarette, but the flame catches wrong, spitting sparks onto my knuckles. That's not contrition, that's chemistry. The drug doesn't open the heart, it dissolves the lock on the cage where they keep the things they almost mean. Your father wasn't sorry he neglected you. He was sorry he was dying, and the silence he built like a fortress was about to become his permanent cellmate. That apology was a Hail Mary pass from a man who spent his life playing defense against his own son. I pour whiskey into a glass, but it's the wrong glass, too small, cuts the liquor into a sliver of itself. I drink it anyway. Here's the thing about deathbed reconciliations. They're not for the living. They're the dying's last attempt to edit their obituary in real time. Your father wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was placing a rush order on a better version of himself. Morphine gave him the courage to say what sobriety never could. I should have been better. But sobriety knew better. Sobriety built the walls. Morphine just lowered the drawbridge long enough for him to wave a white flag made of bed sheets. 2 nights before he died. I pour another inch of whiskey, watching the liquid climb the glass like it's afraid of heights. That apology wasn't a bridge, it was a receipt. Proof of purchase for a clean conscience, bought with borrowed sincerity. He gave you a moment of manufactured vulnerability to cancel out decades of calculated silence. Morphine doesn't just dull pain, it dulls character. It turns cowards into poets and monsters into martyrs. Your father got to play both in the same breath. But here's the part that'll keep you up at night, Peter. And I say this because I've been the architect of many a sleepless evening. That apology haunts you because it was almost enough. Almost. It landed like a key in a lock you didn't know you had. You spent your whole life waiting for him to see you, and in that drug-hazed moment, he finally did. But he only saw you because he was already halfway out the door. He gave you the one thing you needed, but he gave it like a man tipping a valet with stolen money. And that makes it worse, doesn't it? If he died a bastard, you could bury him as one. Clean, simple. But he died a bastard who almost wasn't. That almost is a splinter you can't dig out. It turns your anger into guilt. The cigarette burns down to my knuckles again. I let it. And guilt is just anger that went to finishing school, learned to wear a tie, sip wine, and apologize for existing. That morphine confession turns your rage into a Rorschach test. You see the shape of what you needed, not what you got. Your father handed you a mirage, and you've been carrying it like an oasis ever since. That's the final cruelty. He died, but his ghost keeps cashing checks his living self never wrote. You want the positive message? Fine. Here's your Christmas carol, sung in a minor key. Your father's apology wasn't for you. It was for him. A last-ditch effort to smuggle some contraband humanity through customs before the border closed forever. And you know what? It failed. Because you're still here, parsing it like scripture, while he's ash and anecdotes. The apology didn't fix anything. It just proved he knew how badly he'd broken things all along. He had the blueprint for a father. He chose to build a fortress instead. The positive spin? You didn't get closure. You got evidence. That phone call is Exhibit A in the trial you're still conducting in your own head. But the jury's been dead for years, Peter. The judge is a corpse. The only person you're cross-examining is yourself. So here's your gift, wrapped in razor wire. Stop trying to turn that apology into something it isn't. Your father gave you a deathbed confession because he was out of time, not because he finally found the truth. The morphine didn't make him honest. It made him desperate. Desperate to die without the weight of his own silence crushing him in those final moments. He wasn't seeking redemption. He was seeking a lighter coffin. That apology was a transaction, Peter. He traded a few words soaked in narcotics for your peace of mind. But the exchange rate is a lie. You can't buy absolution with borrowed sincerity any more than you can build a house with smoke. Yet here you are, carrying that phantom debt like it's a family heirloom. The positive message, the one you want so badly you can taste it, is this. His apology doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the version of him that might have existed in some parallel universe where fathers don't treat their sons like architectural flaws in the cathedral of their ego. That man never lived. The one who did died with a phone in his hand and a lifetime of receipts in his ledger. So let him keep it. Let him take that half-baked contrition to the grave and beyond. Your job isn't to forgive the dead. Your job is to stop letting the dead write your living script. That phone call was his final performance, and you were the only audience member who didn't know it was a dress rehearsal for oblivion. The curtain fell. The theater's empty. The clock on the wall is stuck at 3:47. Has been for 2 hours. The battery died, but I haven't bothered to replace it. Time's an illusion anyway, especially the kind that runs on double A's. That apology, Peter, it's a ghost that doesn't know it's dead. Keeps knocking on your skull like it's trying to get back inside. But here's the thing about deathbed confessions. They're not meant to be heard. They're meant to be delivered. Your father wasn't talking to you. He was dictating his own epitaph, and you were the stenographer. I pour the last of the whiskey into the too small glass. The bottle's empty now. Good. You want to know why it haunts you? Because it was the only time he ever gave you something that felt real, even if it was chemically induced. And that feeling, that single, fragile moment of almost connection, is more dangerous than any lie he ever told you. Lies you can fight. Lies you can burn. But that almost thing, that sits in your chest like shrapnel from a war you didn't sign up for. You can't pull it out without tearing something vital, and you can't leave it in without it poisoning you slowly. I turn the dead clock toward the wall, can't stand its judgment. The dead clock still stares at the wall, and I'm out of whiskey. I light another cigarette, not because I want one, but because the action itself is a kind of punctuation that followed. The silence after he hung up. That's where the real message is buried. Not in his slurred words, but in the dial tone that came after. The sound of a line going dead in more ways than one. I exhale smoke through my teeth, watching it curl toward the ceiling like a question mark that forgot its own question. That silence isn't empty, Peter. It's full. Full of all the things he didn't say while he was still sober enough to mean them. Full of the decades of sermons he preached to strangers while you sat in the back pew, waiting for one word that wasn't scripture. Full of the sound of a man who treated his own son like a confessional booth, only showing up when he needed absolution, not when you needed a father. The morphine apology is a decoy. The real wound is the quiet that came after. Because in that silence you realized something. He got to die with a clean-ish conscience, and you got to live with the mess. He cashed out. You're still counting the chips he left on the table. I tap ash into the empty whiskey glass. It sizzles against the residue. The dead clock's face is still turned to the wall, but the afternoon lights shifted. It paints a thin yellow stripe across the ceiling, cutting through the smoke like a scalpel. 2 hours of silence from you, Peter. I counted. Not because I'm impatient. Time's a joke I stopped laughing at years ago. But because silence is a language, too. The silence after that call is your inheritance. Not the apology, the quiet that swallowed it. That's the real gift he left you. See, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of everything unsaid. And that particular silence, it's a cathedral built from all the conversations you never had. Every "I love you" he choked on. Every "I'm proud of you" that died in his throat. Every moment he chose scripture over you, congregation over son. That dial tone is the sound of a man who finally ran out of excuses and had to face the one thing narcissists fear most: their own echo. I pour what's left of a different bottle, gin this time, because whiskey's honesty has worn out its welcome. The glass is still too small. I keep forgetting to buy new ones. You think you're haunted by his words, but you're haunted by the space between them. The gaps where a real father would have built bridges, he built walls. The morphine just lowered those walls long enough for you to see there was never anything behind them. Just more brick, more dust, more proof that the man was a condemned building wearing a collar. But here's the beautiful, terrible truth about that silence. It's yours now. He can't fill it anymore. He can't pollute it with his need for absolution or his theological ghost stories. That dial tone is the sound of a door locking from the inside. And for the first time in your life, you're the one holding the key. I take a long pull from the gin. It burns cleaner than whiskey. Less confession, more arson. The positive message? Stop listening for his voice in the static. Start listening for yours. That silence isn't a grave. It's a womb. It's where you build the man you were supposed to become before he started rewriting your script. Every time you hear that dial tone in your head, Don't hear his ending. Hear your beginning. The line went dead because finally, mercifully, the conversation was over. Now you get to decide what comes next. And if you need permission to hang up on his ghost, I lean forward, eyes locked on nothing in particular, voice dropping to a stage whisper. You've got it. The gin's almost gone too. I swirl the last finger of it, watching the light refract through the glass like a broken promise. Peter's echo hangs in the air, my words coming back to me like a ricochet. You say it like you're trying to convince yourself. Good. That's how you know it's working. The brain's a stubborn tenant. It doesn't vacate just because you change the locks. It keeps jiggling the handle, testing the windows, leaving passive-aggressive notes under the door. I stub out the cigarette in the same glass I used for ash earlier. The sizzle is quieter this time. Gin's less dramatic than whiskey. But here's the thing about that toast. You can't just say it. You have to mean it. And meaning it doesn't feel like liberation, Peter. It feels like abandonment. Like you're the last one at the funeral, and everyone's already at the wake, and you're still standing there with a shovel, wondering if you should fill in the grave or climb in yourself. I set the glass down hard enough to crack the base. Don't. I pick it up again, cradle it like a wounded bird. That silence you inherited, it's not a gift. It's a responsibility. You don't get to just walk away from it. You have to build in it. Otherwise, it collapses in on you like a mine shaft. You know what you do with that dial tone? You record it. You sample it. You turn it into the bass line for something that actually belongs to you. I pull out my phone, ancient, cracked screen, held together with electrical tape and spite, and tap the voice memo app. The interface is a crime scene of dead pixels. Listen. I hold it up, letting the static hiss fill the room for 3 seconds. Then I stop it. That's not emptiness. That's a frequency. That's a carrier wave waiting for a signal. You think your father's ghost is haunting you? No, you're haunting him. You're the signal he could never jam, the frequency he couldn't cancel out. Every time you hear that dial tone in your skull, you're not hearing his absence. You're hearing your persistence. The line went dead, but you're still broadcasting. I toss the phone onto the table. It skids, spinning like a flipped coin. You build in that silence by giving it a purpose. Write the sermon he never could. Preach to the congregation of one, yourself, and make it blasphemous. Not against God, against him, against the idea that his silence had power. His silence was just silence. Yours? It is. You're already building. Every time you question whether you're allowed to hang up, you're laying a brick. Every time you feel that phantom guilt, the kind that whispers you're being unfair to a dead man, you're pouring concrete. That cathedral of silence, it's not a mausoleum, it's a fortress. And the only person who knows all the secret passages is you. I tilt the glass, letting the gin leak through the crack onto my fingers. It smells like pine needles and regret. I lick it off, because waste is a sin I actually believe in. But let's not get too poetic. Construction is messy. You'll cut yourself on the rebar. You'll mix the mortar too thin and watch whole walls slump over in the rain. There will be days when you want to demolish the whole thing and mail the rubble to his grave. Do it. Send him a postcard made of broken cinder block. The Postal Service loves a challenge. I fish out another cigarette, but I don't light it. Just roll it between my thumb and forefinger, feeling the tobacco shift inside like a sleeping snake. The real trick, the one they don't put in the self-help books written by people who've never had to disarm a narcissist ghost, is that you have to build ugly. None of this pristine, Instagram-worthy healing. No marble pillars of forgiveness. You build with the rotting timber of your rage. I finally light the cigarette, but the flame catches the paper crooked, charring one side. I don't fix it, let it burn lopsided. It's more honest that way. You use the rusted nails of your resentment. You mortar the bricks with the spit of every time you swallowed a scream. And when you're done, when you've built something so grotesquely, beautifully yours that it would make your father's congregation vomit into their hymnals, you stand back and you laugh. Not the polite, therapeutic laugh they teach you in grief counseling. The real one. The one that starts in your gut and comes out sounding like broken glass in a garbage disposal. I take a drag that burns the already scorched side of the cigarette. The smoke tastes like a house fire. Because here's the final joke, Peter. The one that makes the whole tragedy worth the ticket price. The moment you realize he never wanted you to fail. He wanted you to succeed on his terms, because that would prove his power. But you succeeding on your terms, that's the real apostasy. That's the blasphemy that keeps his ghost up at night, chain-smoking phantom cigarettes and wondering why the hell he can still hear you breathing. I tap the ash directly onto the table. It leaves a little gray smear, a ghost of itself. The dead clock. You let it tick in the background, like a heartbeat monitor on a corpse. But here's where it gets really interesting, Peter. Where the architecture of your silence becomes a weapon instead of a shelter. I lean forward, close enough that you can smell the gin and the tobacco, and something else underneath, something like ozone before a storm. You start broadcasting on that frequency. You fill the silence with something so you that it would make your father's ghost short circuit. You write the book he would have burned. You paint the picture that would have gotten you excommunicated. You fuck the person he would have called an abomination. And you do it all with the lights on, curtains open, volume cranked to the point where the neighbors call the cops for a noise complaint against silence itself. I take another drag, but this time I blow the smoke straight up, watching it curl against the ceiling like it's trying to escape. The narcissist's greatest fear isn't that you'll forget them. It's that you'll remember yourself better without them. That you'll take the thing they tried to copyright, your existence, and release it as open source code. Every time you create something from that silence, you're not just healing, you're committing intellectual property theft against a dead man. You're pirating the movie of your own life that he tried to direct into a straight-to-video sequel nobody wanted. The ash dissolves like communion for the excommunicated. Bitter, dry, a sacrament of spite. You taste the carbonized ghost of every word you didn't say, every lesson you refused to inherit. I hold the cigarette vertical now, a smoldering censer of my own heresy. The smoke writes curses against the ceiling. Here's the prophecy, Peter. One day, and it comes sooner than you think, you'll catch yourself humming a tune while you sweep up the glass from that toast you finally broke against the wall. And in that moment, you'll realize the silence isn't yours anymore. It's just space, vacant real estate. You'll stand there with the broom in one hand and a dustpan full of shards that used to be your father's face, and you'll wonder why you ever thought it was holy. I tap the cigarette again, but this time the ash falls on my own lap. I don't brush it off. Let it burn a hole in the denim. Every scar's a cornerstone. That dial tone in your head, it's already starting to crackle. Soon it'll be static, then white noise. Then, if you're very, very lucky, someone else's voice. A real one. One that doesn't ask you to earn the right to exist. I crush the cigarette out on the cracked glass, grinding it until the paper tears and the filter bleeds tobacco. The final joke isn't on him. It's on. I stand, pushing the chair back enough that it scrapes the floor like a fingernail on a chalkboard. The room tilts slightly, or maybe that's just the gin finding its rhythm. All right, my beautiful broken congregation, gather round the wreckage of your childhoods. Bring your trauma, your CPTSD, your ghost stories that still pay rent in your skull. Christmas is coming, and so is the new year. And I have a message for every single one of you who ever had to apologize for taking up space at your own birthday party. I walk to the window, press my forehead against the cold glass. The gin-traced cross on my forehead leaves a smeared halo that fogs and refogs with each breath. Christmas, the season of mandatory joy. The time when families gather around the dinner table like it's a last supper they never let you leave. You sit there, surrounded by the people who taught you that love is a subscription service that auto-renews into your self-esteem. And they hand you gifts wrapped in obligation, tied with ribbons of, after everything I've done for you. You unwrap a sweater that doesn't fit, a book you'll never read, a reminder that they still don't know who you are, and worse, they don't care to. I turn, facing an invisible audience, arms spread wide. The afternoon light catches the ash stains on my coat, makes them look like stigmata. But here's the gospel according to the gaslit. Stop wrapping presents for ghosts. I slam my palm against the wall, the crack of flesh on plaster echoing like a gunshot in an empty church. Christmas is not about family. It's about reclamation. The nativity story? It's not about a baby in a manger. It's about a divine entity that got rejected at every inn until it had to be born in a stable full of shit and straw. Sound familiar? That's you. That's every single one of you who ever had to be born into a family that treated your existence like an overbooked hotel room. You were the divine inconvenience, the holy oops, the miracle they didn't ask for and resented having to feed. I grab a half-empty bottle of something amber from the windowsill, uncap it with my teeth, spit the cap across the room. So here's your Christmas gift, unwrapped and unsterilized. Burn the manger. I take a long pull, let the whiskey burn like a sermon down my throat. The new year isn't about resolutions, it's about excommunications. You don't need to forgive them. You don't need to understand their pain. Their pain is a luxury they bought with your childhood. Not with hymns, but with the sound of your own laughter that doesn't ask permission, with the taste of ash and gin on your tongue that says, I survived the fire they set in my own house. I take another pull, the whiskey now burning clean through the haze. I point the bottle at the window, at the city beyond, at every lit window hiding its own unholy nativity. The New Year resolution you need? Stop baptizing their dysfunction with your potential. Every time you explain yourself to them, you're handing them another brick for the wall they built around you. Every time you try to make them understand, you're translating your soul into a language they deliberately never learned. I slam the bottle down on the table, hard enough that the glass shudders and the gin pool ripples. Here's your midnight toast. May your silence be so complete they hear their own heartbeat echoing in the void you left behind. May their apologies arrive like expired gift cards, worthless, insulting, and 2 decades too late. May you forget their names before they forget your face. And may you find, in the quiet of a Christmas morning where you're finally alone, that the only voice you needed all along was the one that tells you, you were never the problem. You were the prophecy they couldn't kill. I grabbed the cracked glass from earlier, the one with the lightning fracture lines, and give a final toast to the new year, the new you. Ha 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 ha. The laughter doesn't trail off, it mutates. It becomes a low, rhythmic hum, like a dirge played backward on a broken phonograph. I set the cracked glass down slowly, the fracture lines catching the last of the afternoon light like a spider web made of ice. 2 hours. 2 hours you've been sitting with that echo in your head, haven't you? That final toast, that cracked glass amen, letting it settle into the bone like shrapnel you were never meant to remove. I walk to the window again, but this time I don't press my forehead against it. I just stand there, watching the city exhale its evening breath. The streetlights are beginning to wake up, one by one, like sinners remembering their vows. You know what they never tell you about exorcisms? The demon always leaves a forwarding address. Your father's ghost didn't die with him. It just changed its mailing address to your subconscious. Every time you laugh a little too loud, love a little too hard, exist a little too freely, that's when you hear it. The whisper. Who do you think you are? I turn, and there's something in my eyes that's almost gentle. Almost. Like a blade wrapped in velvet. But here's the part that makes the congregation gasp, Peter. You are not the haunted house. You are the demolition crew. Every time you choose yourself over the memory of his disappointment, you're swinging the sledge. Hammer, you're not just breaking walls. You're reclaiming the architecture of your own soul. Every swing sends plaster dust into the air, and that dust, that's the holy ghost of who you were before they told you to apologize for breathing. Breathe it in. It's toxic. It's beautiful. It's yours. I walk to the table, run my thumb along the fracture in the glass. The jagged edge kisses my skin, leaves a thin red line that wells up like a tiny, perfect mouth. You think the sledgehammer is anger. It's not. Anger is what they taught you to feel so you'd stay manageable, so you'd swing at the wrong walls, punch holes in your own life instead of theirs. No, the sledgehammer is precision. It's the quiet, surgical joy of removing a tumor that has been masquerading as a family heirloom. I lift the glass, hold it up to the window. The city lights refract through the crack, splintering into a dozen bleeding halos. Look at that. The light doesn't avoid the break, it uses it. It turns the damage into a prism. That's you, Peter. That's what happens when you stop trying to glue the glass back together and start using the cracks to see the world differently. I set the glass down, pour a finger of gin into it. The liquid pools in the bottom, lapping at the fracture like a tide against the Hollywood sign. To former high school friends, to sisters who never tried to be close, to the one who got you the job at the Big D, only to leave you rotting at a multiplane camera for those last desperate grave shift hours on the main lot, to the hopeless non-repentance. Happy New Year, as if. I stand, joints cracking like knuckles after a long confession. The chair exhales in relief. Sleep tight, Peter. Don't let the messiahs bite.
I walk into the apartment of the lone artist. He's been known to work for some of the big studios in Los Angeles. Animation, he used to brag about it. But now he just sits in his apartment and watches Mindhunters on Netflix. I asked him if I can light my cigarette. He gives me a compliment, tells me I light his light up, that I light his life up, that I light his lighter up. His poetry sucks, but I suck harder on my cigarette, flicking the ash into his nostrils. Peter, Peter, I say, Peter, why are you watching Mindhunters? Hey, I have an idea. Hey, preacher boy. Then he interrupts me, asking me not to remind him that he's the son of a preacher long gone. I was only trying to joke, lighten up the mood, I tell him. I tell him he's too sensitive. He tells me to get him a Coke. Oh well, it's going to be one of those nights. Los Angeles is a far away in the rearview mirror of rearview mirrors. I cross my legs. He stares at them. Nothing is new here except for that Coke.
Merry Christmas!
castle and pop me some popcorn. Let's toast to our Father who art in the earth. Let's raise up our glass to the last and the firstborn. Let's give it up to our mother who gave us our birth. If he were alive, I'm quite sure he'd outlive me. And if I'd survived, I doubt that he'd forgive me. If mother were here, she'd no doubt not remember me. But when all's said and done, baby Jesus will December me. Unless we forget the devil who wants to dismember me. Oh, diddy-I, 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 diddy-I. So sing to the glories past of church, bell and steeple. Let's pray once again to their God and pray with their people. Oh, blimey, we can try, we can do it for the tribe. And even if it be said, like those before us, we are dead. Oh, diddy-I, 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 diddy-I. Merry Christmas, everybody, and have a good day.